Colleagues and friends, a very, very good morning to you. My name is Maniga Pillay. My day job is the technical advisor to the Higher Education, Health, Wellness and Development Center. I, in my capacity as a program director for this event, will assist you in maneuvering the program for today. I'd like to start off by warmly welcoming Professor Mary Moleki, who's the director of the School of Social Sciences, to do the opening and welcome. Prof.
Good morning, colleagues. I welcome you this morning to this prestigious occasion that has been organized by the College of Human Sciences in collaboration with the Unisa HIV and AIDS Social Diversity Curriculum Integration Team. Welcome to this gender-based violence and femicide dialogue. Before I even continue, I would like to acknowledge our program director, as she had already introduced herself, Managa Pillay, and I am Mary Moleki, the director of the School of Social Sciences. I'm standing here on behalf of Professor Phillips, the executive dean of the College of Human Sciences, who could not be here this morning. Colleagues, thank you very much for being here. And I hope we are going to have fruitful discussions. And I'm aware that sometimes, the discussion or the topic of today, to some of us, it brings pain, it reminds us of where we come from or where we were raised. But I hope that as we are going to deliberate and debate and talk to each other, at the end of the day, we would have made change in our lives. I would like not to waste more time. I would acknowledge our guests who will be joining us, some of them. I acknowledge Mr. Beki Cele, Member of the Parliament, the Minister of Police, who will be joining us around 12. Professor Tenjiwe Meyiwa, Vice Principal Research, Postgraduate Studies, Innovation and Commercialization, will be joining us together with the Minister. Professor Nogutula Mazibuko, Associate Professor in CHS and the Project Leader of this occasion. Advocate Tsidiso Tipanyane, CEO of South African Human Rights Commission. Advocate Pumla Ndwane Altman, social activist in human trafficking. She is running her own NGO. I also acknowledge the presence of Professor Zethu Nkosi, manager of CHS Office of Tuition, Learner Support and Community Engagement. Leon Roots, HIV/AIDS and Social Diversity Curriculum Integration Project Leader. Natalia Mulebazi, the poet, to pay tribute to Mama Albertina Sisulu. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, you are all welcomed this morning. And let us deliberate. I also acknowledge Ms. Toko Mpumlwana from FNB Bank, who's the chairperson of, is FNB? Or FNB Board. Not bank, board. You are all welcome, colleagues. Let us relax, let us talk, let us share, and all of us at the end of the day, by the time we leave, we will live with being better people and being empowered with better knowledge. Thank you very much.
Colleagues, let me then just do some house rules while we're done. For those of you that don't know the venue, The bathrooms are to my right. We would appreciate it if you put your cell phones on silent, and we would really like to encourage your participation, and we're looking forward to a robust discussion. So, it is a simple but stark fact, ladies and gentlemen, that violence in South Africa is endemic. Statistics on femicide, rape, domestic violence demonstrate unprecedented prevalence rates, as you know. According to the South African Demographic and Health Survey, 1 in 5 women have experienced physical violence, and the medical research report recently indicated that 3 women die in the hands of their intimate partners every day. And a report by the African Check actually revealed some scary and stark statistics. And it was said that the global rate for femicide in 2015 was 2.4 women per 100,000 women. But in South Africa, in the same year, we were looking at 9.6 per 100,000 women. And I'm sure you agree that these are chilling statistics. And the rate of sexual violence is also one of the highest in the world. And we also know that the higher education sector is a microcosm of society, and we are starting to see similar trends within our walls. Interestingly, you know that we have one of the most progressive constitutions and a Bill of Rights, which is supposed to enshrine the rights of women. Yet, if we look at all the headlines that we've seen in the last couple of weeks, we begin to wonder what this actually means to us as a society. And that despite this myriad of legal protections, women in South Africa continue to experience extremely high rates of violence. Ladies and gentlemen, it is against this backdrop that I want to introduce the next speaker, and that's Prof. Nokuthula Mazibuko, who is an associate professor and the project leader at Unisa. Thank you, Prof. Presentation.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Sanbonani. Molweni. As I was introduced, I'd like to say that besides being called Professor Nokuthula Mazibuko, I am a Dlamini. That is my maiden name. I am uMasibalkhulu, uJokozela kaMphathwa, Maguduzela, Ulatha. I'm just giving you a brief of my clan to say that they are present with me, my ancestors are present with me as I'm speaking to you about something that is very dear to me. As we sit in this room today, we know of someone, or we are that someone, who has been a victim or a survivor of intimate partner violence, or we normally say in South Africa, domestic violence. And I was given a task to give a purpose statement for this event of today as we celebrate Women's Month, a beautiful month where we need to, as women, empower each other, remind each other of where we're coming from. And it also coincidentally happens to be my birth month. And being my namesake, Nokuthula, where it means I'm the mother of peace, I hope I will bring peace to you today. As South African learning institutions are integrating HIV and AIDS decolonized education, Africanized education in the curriculum of higher education, there is also a critical agency to integrate gender-based violence into the curriculum of higher education sector. We are aware that South Africa is a youthful population, and we have our National Development Plan 2030, which aims at improving the education system by increasing student retention to 90%, increase enrollment at university to 70% by 2030. However, it has become evident that universities in South Africa or higher education sectors in South Africa do not, at the present moment, have a gender-based violence policy, and that campuses in our higher learning institutions do not have gender offices whereby gender-based violence cases are most likely to be reported. However, there has been a work in progress of aiming to introduce a policy that would address gender-based violence. And my plea to higher learning institutions is that every institution must have a gender office that will ensure that the policy that is still work in progress is implemented in the right way. As we are aware, ladies and gentlemen, that we need to end the violence against women and children, and in some cases also men. Coming back to the National Development Plan and its aim to increase enrollment as well as retention, where we have seen in the last few months, few years, that gender-based violence has plagued its campuses and country at large. There is a risk that the National Development Plan 2030 will not or could not implement its enrollment the way that it should, and it could not retain students, and therefore it could fail if this policy is not implemented in the rightful way. Gender-based violence is a worldwide epidemic. Globally, it is estimated that 1 in 3 women will be beaten, coerced into sex, or otherwise abused in her lifetime by an intimate partner or non-partners. A study conducted by Mercury and Donaldson in 2017 revealed that sexual violence, even in the UK universities, has been the focus of significant media attention, with 1 in 4 women students reportedly unwanted sexual behavior during their first term of studies. And then, as scholars, we like to understand, the reasons, or as we diagnose the problem, we always want to find out what are the reasons, what are the indicators of gender-based violence. And the ones that we know of are patriarchy, femininity, inequality structures, people's positions, and in today's tongue, we know of the blessers phenomenon. I don't have to elaborate on that, but it has been a phenomenon that has been happening in the last few years. And I always say the issues of blessers are not issues of the blesser and the young woman who is in a relationship, but there are societal issues whereby we are all to be blamed for all these social ills. Okay, so gender-based violence has its impact on the country's economic prospects. As I'm standing in front of you, ladies and gentlemen, it is said that the costs of gender-based violence in South Africa is more than 28.4 billion per year. 28.4 billion per year. And therefore, the higher education must stress the importance of community engagement and involvement when designing curriculum responses to gender-based violence. Specific human rights activists in communities, workplaces, and societies should form the cornerstones for curriculum response to by the higher education sectors as well as mainstreaming strategies. Curriculum integration of gender-based violence and gender-related issues within the African context are possibilities and must be implemented in the higher education sector. So the importance of today's discussion is how we as activists, as scholars, as human rights commissions, how can we share our knowledge, our insight in ending gender-based violence, which is a violation of human rights for every woman, every child, and every man who is a victim or a survivor of gender-based violence. And I thank you for now, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Prof. Colleagues, I just wanted to pick up on a few points that Prof mentioned. So to start off with, I think we need to acknowledge, in preparing for this, I thought, let me just do a quick check, of the recent femicide cases. And this is what I found. It was really just a very quick cursory check. Karabo Mokoena, 22 years old, her body was burnt, her organs were missing, and she was beyond recognition. She was a student. Zolile Kumalo, MUT, many of you have heard of her. She was also killed by her intimate partner. Jabu Nshlapo was actually a Unisa student, also killed by her intimate partner. And Cornelius, I'm not exactly sure of her full name, was a Stellenbosch University student that was stabbed, but also her head was crushed beyond recognition. And then, of course, we all know the cases of Riva, Steenkamp, Anine Boysen, and Annie Devani. So I think my point is that as higher education institutions, it's a cliche that we are a microcosm of society. But I think I want to argue that if we do not start taking the responsibility to change the narrative in terms of the violence that we engage with in our country, I think that we're actually fighting a losing battle. I remember in early 2000 when Minister Kada Asmal challenged us as the higher education sector to say what is the rightful place that higher education takes in responding to, at the time, HIV and AIDS. He said to us that we have a responsibility because we do two critical things. Number one, we generate knowledge. And how do we generate knowledge? We generate knowledge by confronting the norms. We challenge information. We should engage in critical thought. So if I say to you, this is a pen, you need to look at it critically and challenge this information so that we generate new knowledge. And he also said that we are about the creation of leaders and social change agents. And we need to start questioning, what does it mean to have graduates pass through our systems? And how do we create social change agents? So I think I want to put that forward as a challenge, that we need to be able to take this responsibility. In terms of what Prof mentioned about the policy and strategy framework, many of you know that when the Rhodes students released the grey list in 2016, there was a huge outcry. There was this wave of protest across the sector. But this wave of protest was not a new protest. It was not a new wave. In fact, there was a little bit of silence and denial and stillness before this, activism came into being again. When you look at the literature, activism around gender-based violence and femicide and sexual harassment and rape started as early as the 70s. In fact, post-apartheid, it began being disguised as social inequality, but we need to realize that it was just a disguise as well, because women and men were actually experiencing high levels of violence and discrimination. So post the Rhodes List, the Department of Higher Education and Training did sit up. Whatever motivated the Department of Higher Education and Training, I think we can leave that for another day. But the point is, they did sit up. We were mobilized as the Higher Education Health and Wellness Program, as well as UN Women, government agencies around the table, the Medical Research Council. We were asked to put together a policy framework. So Prof is right. We have draft 13, and the reason why I specify draft 13 is because to reflect to you that it was a huge process. It was not done with ease. We spent a lot of time writing the policy framework, but we then spent most of last year consulting with universities, colleges, stakeholders, NGOs, CBOs, so that we have what we think is a fairly inclusive and comprehensive policy framework. At the moment, it's sitting with the Department of Higher Education and Training for CHE engagement. As you know, CHE and DPME, the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, advises the Minister on policy. Once that's done, she will release it and gazette it for public comment, and we are hopeful that by 16 days of activism in November, that we then release the policy framework. The policy framework, colleagues, does two very important things. It impresses on higher education institutions to utilize their core mandate to, number one, ensure that victims of violence are efficiently and effectively and expediently managed. And number two, it talks about a critical prevention role. And within prevention, we look at the first curriculum and second curriculum. And Prof, that is why it excites me when you mention curriculum reformation and integration. And I think the one thing that we learned when we did HIV integration is that academics were very resistant. I mean, a commerce lecturer, a maths lecturer, an economics lecturer was saying, I don't have the agency to do this. Why are you engaging me with a social issue? But when we paused and we got their attention, we said, let's look at the issues in South Africa. There is not a single issue that doesn't have an intersectionality to it. So when you look at violence, in fact, we were at a critical thinking forum with the Deputy Minister on LGBTI at Wits University the day before. And one person stood up and he was angry and he said, forget LGBTQI. Let's look at poverty. Let's look at the fact that our student out there is living on the street. And he was angry, but he also made a very critical point that when you look at these issues, you have to appreciate its intersectionalities. You have to appreciate that, the advocate from the Gender Commission and I were talking about this issue of numbers, and the need that we need to look at issues of psychosocial development. So we need to start appreciating the intersectionalities, and hence, Prof, I want to argue that every college sitting here at Unisa will be able to find themselves a space in changing the narrative when it comes to gender-based violence and femicide. The other issue that I sort of want to pause on is the issue of violence against men. And in fact, that came up as a very critical issue when we did the consultations, because men were saying, hang on, are you not forgetting about us? So I think my response to that is that in reality, we need to realize that unfortunately, women are more susceptible and vulnerable to violence. We have an endemic in our country, and we need to address it. We need to look at issues of roles and responsibilities. And the point I want to make is that when you look at LGBTQI, when you look at members of the LGBTI population that are subjected to violence, corrective rape, discrimination, abuse, etc., etc., it's about the fact that they're questioning masculinity. It's because I have feminine tendencies that I'm seen to be a victim, or I'm seen to be an easy target. So I think it's important to look at it from that perspective as well, as opposed to looking at the gender binaries. But it's really about the roles and responsibilities that we play in society, and we need to start looking at it in that space. I've spoken to you about curriculum integration, the policy, and intersectionalities, and it's really just some thoughts that I wanted to pick up from Prof, so that when we go into the panel discussion, we can, sort of talk about it a little bit. I would now like to call Natalia. Natalia, are you here? Natalia, where are you? There we go, Natalia. Natalia Molobatsi. She's going to help us pay a tribute to Mama Albertina Sisulu.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I am surprised that you are still stretched out here. Urban planters and dreamers at the outcry of inconsistent promises. Urban planters and dreamers at the outskirts of incomplete promises. Earthquake like fury and fires and floods that seem to rest only at ease on the summerland of someone's flesh. Your flesh, wagiti. Your flesh, tutuzeka wena onzakaleyo. Your flesh, tutuzeka wena uthenjisiweyo. Always, always the promised one. So, in celebrating Me Albertina Sisulu, who was a selfless human being, it's impossible to not invoke the spirits, the memories of the people she walked with, her tribe. The people who came before her and the people who came after her. And I'm thinking just of a few names. Me Winnie Madikizela Mandela, Me Miriam Tladi, Me Zondeni Sobukwe, who actually passed away yesterday. Me Fatima Mir, who had her birthday just a few days ago. These people walked as a community, as a unit, and for the kind of work that they did, for that to be possible, they worked as a community. So this poem that I am dedicating to Me Albertina Sisulu, I'm also dedicating to these other women. I'm dedicating to my grandmother, to women who came before me. I'm dedicating it to my daughter. I'm dedicating it to the women who sit in here who know these struggles. Amending season. You are a song singing in the deepest voice of my people. A lullaby cusping tears and an amandla song to every child of the storm. Someone said, Someone said that you are the wind beneath the broken wing of my people. Another one said that women like you are the mending season of our aching. Women like you give and give and give their last breath to ignite fires called revolution. Even when they are force-fed the rules of silence, they fight to tell their story in the season of their voice. And inside their bodies, inside your body, reside the melodies of your people. You and you, with an uncontainable wail that grew louder and larger than the tight grip of oppression. You, with words that force open the doors of a world that was never, that will never be ready for our kind. It's time now for night to moon you with the secret conversations of time and moments of endearment. The same moon that will welcome you on an orbit of black magic woman wonderment. You will let this world know that you loved her more than she could ever love you or even live for herself. You who worked harder than what this world can give. How do I thank you? How do I thank you for your pain, for your banned and jailed and unacknowledged dreams? Your same dreams that are now gifts for my bag of memory. The same bag that is a bag I will find gifts through which I will craft songs for tomorrow's giving and tomorrow's healing. Oh, you can clap hands now. Gazala, you don't have to. I was just joking. I'm cool with silence too. Guys, can I just say something? Ma'am, I'm sorry to do this to you. My high school teacher is in the house! Damn it! Please stand up, Dr. Mavuso. Yeah. I learned from women like you to use my voice and to hold myself intact. I learned from women like you. And thank you for walking this journey with me. I see you. If your teacher is in the house, please holla. I mean, that's a big thing. I mean, hey. So, I did mention earlier on that as we invoke the spirit and celebrate the life of May Albertina Sisulu, there is no way that you cannot speak about her sisters, her peers, her colleagues. And I would like to dedicate another piece to Me Fatima Mir. It's called Melody. There are memories of love and struggle, falling and flying off of silent walls. You lifted silent things into screams, made them remember, made them recollect, marked them in place as reference, as lineage, hid color and brush in spaces of private touch and longing. Rolled them up, these memories. Rolled them up, these memories, and smuggled them in and out of bodies. These words are just a path to evoke your name and your spirit as a work of an open heart. another way of recollecting you as a melody and as a story of ours. So, I know, the thing is, the problem with calling me, dear friend, where are you? When you call me, I might hesitate because I'm thinking, oh, the shoes are too big, or I'm not well. But when I get to the stage, oh, alalibona. It's going to be hard to leave the stage because when I get to the stage, hey, ubanzima, ubusuga. I'm joking, I'm not going to be long. This next poem is a dedication to Mesbongile Khumalo, because we all know what music does, right? Music kind of unravels us, it loosens us up, and it brings us closer to ourselves. It brings us closer to one another, right? So this one is called The Healer. For Sibongile Khumalo and the song inside her voice. When the world burns, she is cooling water, a breath of life and light, this woman, a gift from her people to ours. When the cows are crying, and the children, and the dogs too, I close my eyes to see her sound move an entire world of oceans and bones. An affirmation that God lives here. God lives here in undertones and vibrations, wiping the heavy tears of this earth. The gods live here inside the vein of this music. Ladies and gentlemen, Mafrika Amantle, my name is Natalia, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Natalia, for showing us that we can do a lot through art, music, and poetry. And for the esteemed panel that's going to come forward, I think you have a tough act to follow. So colleagues, just to take you through the next session, we're going to have now an esteemed panel that is going to set the context for us in terms of looking at gender-based violence and femicide. May I ask the panel to join me on stage while I introduce them? Come, look, these wonderful seats are for you. And just to say that the minister will join us in a little while, and then we'll have the opportunity to hear his keynote address. So let me very quickly introduce the panel. Advocate Tipani spent a better part of the morning regaling us with wonderful stories, so I promise you, you are going to be very invigorated with his address. He is the Chief Executive Officer of the South African Human Rights Commission and the former Chief CEO of the Safer South Africa Foundation. He spent 13 years in the Human Rights Commission as head of research and mainly responsible for the monitoring of economic and social rights and access to information before becoming the Chief Executive Officer. He's a former researcher on criminal justice at the University of KwaZulu-Natal and a former lecturer at the University of Western Cape, where he lectured criminal procedure. He also served at Columbia University in the law school, looking at African human rights systems at the Ramapo, am I saying that right, Advocate? Ramapo College of New Jersey, also looking at African politics and human rights. He has numerous publications on human rights and has presented various papers across the countries in Africa, Europe, America, and Asia, and he has been admitted as the advocate of the High Court in Lesotho in South Africa. He has served on the Project Committee on Social Justice, on the South African Law Commission, and he is an executive member of the Council of Advancement of South Africa's Constitution and a former board member of the Open Democracy Advice Center. When I grow up, I want to have a resume like that. I would like to now introduce Professor Mazibuko. She is with the College of Human Sciences here in Unisa. She's an associate professor from the Department of Sociology. She obtained her BA in 2000, her BA 2001, a BA Honors in 2002, her MA in 2005, and a PhD in Sociology in 2015. Her academic career spans over 14 years. Her research interest is domestic violence and intimate partner violence. She has published articles in accredited journals nationally and internationally. She has reviewed articles submitted for publication on both the national and international front and has presented several papers at seminars and conferences, and she is very involved in community projects. She has published opinion pieces for the University Focus magazine and your internal website called eNews Income, and she has published articles for newspapers such as the Praetorian News and the Durban Daily News, and in addition, she's proudly the mother of 2 boys and a wife. Last but not least is our dear advocate Pumla Dwane Alpman, there we go. Pumla is also an advocate. She has a Bachelor of Social Science from the University of Cape Town. She majored in Industrial Psychology and Political Science. She has a Bachelor of Law from the University of Natal and Masters of Law majoring in Constitutional Theory, Law, Litigation from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Pumla has an extensive work experience, and I must say, Pumla, it sounds like you really started off from the grassroots, so I think we're really in good hands. She started off very early in 1994 as a violence monitor and investigator. She's worked as a legal assistant. She was an investigator with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and spent a bit of time looking at evidence analysis. With the National Prosecuting Authority, she served as a senior state advocate. She assisted the Office of the Premier in Eastern Cape as a special advisor and legal advisor. And then she also, as if that was not enough, served as a volunteer and an intern at Open Door Crisis Center as a lay counselor. However, I've been told that her passion lies with human trafficking. And she is the founding director of, that's a hard one to say. She's the founding director of, I'm assuming, an organization dealing with human trafficking, and has spent a lot of her time looking at legal assistance and support to victims of human trafficking and raising awareness on human trafficking. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is our esteemed panel. We're going to allow, in the order in which they are sitting, the panel members an opportunity to share their thoughts with us, and then we'll take it from there. Advocate, you are up first.
Thank you, Program Director and colleagues, comrades. I also thank the organizers of this event for inviting me and my colleagues sitting there from the South African Human Rights Commission. I must say I was a little bit embarrassed. I was not aware that Constitutional Court will make a finding so soon on a matter which my colleagues had brought against the President of South Africa, but it's one of those things. Today, on the issue of gender-based violence and femicide, which is what we're asked to talk about, I think one of the biggest problems in our country, I've got 5 minutes, I guess, is that women's rights are human rights. And I think the failure to appreciate this and deal with this as men is what is causing a major challenge in our society as far as gender-based violence is concerned. Because you don't destroy nor attack what you don't fear and what you love. And therefore, we need to unpack that and understand. But what is very clear over the last 20 years is that we are witnessing increases in gender-based violence. Some results we've picked up recently is that there has been an increase of 53% from 2015 to 2016 in sexual offenses, from 31,000 in 2015 cases to 70,000 cases, and 80% of these cases are rapes. So you can imagine what this means in terms of women's rights being human rights. And we've also seen an increase in murder rates, which also affect women. Now the issue is why we have this situation and what is behind this. And I think we are all aware, or at least most of us, that the issue is patriarchy. They believe that men are superior to women, and that women are there for the taking of men, and men should do whatever they want. And of course, in a democracy, when these notions, which are infused through culture, religion, and everything else, get challenged, then you get this backlash where we are seeing increases as far as gender-based violence is concerned. And of course, this phenomena then goes against the very values of our constitutional order, values of non-sexism, values of human dignity, and human rights. And it's very interesting that there will be very few men in this country who will say they don't subscribe to those values of human rights, democracy, and human rights. But as soon as they stop saying that, they go and do the opposite. And therefore, we need to understand what demon is pushing this kind of behavior. Now, what are the solutions? I think I'm left with 3 minutes. So what are the solutions really towards this? And I think one of the biggest challenges, 20 years later, is that clearly we're not doing enough as a country, as institutions, to create awareness that women's rights are human rights. And I think we talk about human rights generally, but when it comes to women, we don't see women's rights as being human rights. And yet we continue saying we are a human rights-based country, we are proudly South Africa, proudly democratic. So what does proudly South African mean? If you say I'm a South African, what are you saying? You are saying that I subscribe to the founding values of what makes a South African. Non-sexism, human rights. So we must stop calling ourselves South Africans unless we don't understand. South Africa does not mean gender-based violence. South Africa means respect for women, women's rights and human rights. That's what South African mean, not the other way. Two, and therefore this requires us to do a lot more to change the attitudes of men towards women. And also to change the attitudes of some women to themselves and to men. Because unfortunately, a lot of women have also subscribed to the notion of patriarchy, that men indeed are superior and men can do whatever. Now, if you might be shocked, let me be controversial. Many victims of racial discrimination also believe that they're inferior to white men. And hence, we see the continuing problems we have in our country. There's also a need, I hope the Minister of Police will be here, there's also a need really for the criminal justice system, the police, prosecution and the courts, to be more effective in the way that we deal with gender-based violence. If you look at the stats, the very same people who are supposed to be protecting women from violence are the police. If you go to the reports of the IPID, you'll see that last year the report said 112 women were raped by police officers. We can talk about the number of police officers who killed their partners. And then the number of police officers who are insensitive when women go and report cases of gender-based violence. Because for them it's, I go back home and sort this thing out. So we need to address this. So how do we expect our rapists to suddenly help rape victims? I'm just being funny, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. Then secondly, or not secondly, there's also a need for Chapter 9 institutions like the Human Rights Commission, Gender Commission, and other statutory bodies to be more effective in addressing issues of patriarchy and gender-based violence. We need to ask of the Human Rights Commission, me and my colleagues here, that in 20 years of our existence, where we want to say we are a prominent human rights organization, what have we done to address gender-based violence? How much of our resources are focusing on addressing the problem? To what extent are we working with Gender Commission and other organizations to address these issues? And if we are not, then how do we say we're a human rights organization if women's rights are human rights? I'll be fired, but it's fine. And then importantly, we need to change the way we bring up our children. In our homes, in our schools, and in our universities. And it's very sad what Professor Mazibuku and the program director was saying, that how many universities today have policies to address gender-based violence? Very few. And we see the incidences happening. How many of our churches on Sunday debunk the myth that men indeed are superior? You know, I come from a religious background, and I used to have this fight with my father. To say, any priest who will tell me that women are inferior is actually not a Christian. But do we actually preach that gospel, or we preach the other gospel? That women must wear their heads in church in honor of men. What is that? Do we ever ask ourselves that? Do we ever ask ourselves why churches like the Catholic churches don't allow women to be priests? Do we ever ask ourselves why, when women make the majority of this country, they keep on voting for men and not women? So we need to address all those issues, colleagues. So definitely then we need to put, and I'm now being controversial, we need to put more efforts in fighting gender-based violence than we are putting in fighting racism in this country. You hear what I'm saying? We need to put more efforts in fighting gender-based violence than we do with racism. But it's the other way around because of patriarchy. And therefore, we cannot, in conclusion, Chairperson, we cannot, as a country, 20 years plus later, say we have made progress in advancing human rights and democracy in our country if the majority of our citizens, who are women, continue to be denied their rights because of gender-based violence. The Human Rights Commission, now to my colleagues, the Human Rights Commission cannot say it's successful if the majority of citizens in this country continue to be denied their human rights, which is women. Thank you.
Good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. It is something that should be personal to every one of us. Personal in a sense that we know it is happening daily. We've heard, we've witnessed, we know of a friend, a daughter, a wife, that they are victims of gender-based violence. I was asked some time ago, why this interest, why not anything else? And my response at the time was, why not this? I am a sister, I am a daughter, I am a wife, and I'm a mother of boys. Advocate Tapanyane was saying it is important how we raise our children. My plea to parents out there, parents of sons and daughters, instill values of self-love, self-reliance, self-appreciation, self-confidence into our children, self-assurance. And let our children know how to express themselves emotionally, artistically, because then if those values are not instilled in them, they will go out as young adults wanting somebody else's approval in order to learn self-love. They will be seeking reliance, seeking approval, seeking love from somebody else without first obtaining it from themselves. Coming back to my presentation, femicide statistics from 2009. So we're looking at 9 years ago. As scholars, we're still looking at 9 years ago, where it indicates that the rate of femicide in South Africa stood at 1 woman killed by intimate male partner every 8 hours. Linking this latest, they still call it latest, 9 years later. Statistics from the South African Medical Research Council, which highlights that 40% of men assault their partners daily, and 3 women in South Africa are killed by intimate partners every day. If you do your mathematics, this means that 1,095 women are killed by their intimate partners every year. I know some of women who were killed by their intimate partners. You think should be assault being physical. There's also emotional, which there is no accountability because our court and our judiciary and our justice, they want physical evidence. I know of women who are survivors but are living with depression, sufferers of strokes, sufferers of diabetes, because they were victims of violence. I always attempt or aim to have lessons learned or recommendations for our government, because we can diagnose the situation, but then they will say they know the reasons, but how do we solve it? And I'll still come back to when the minister is here and also make my own plea about some of the recommendations. We know of adult children who have witnessed gender-based violence in their homes. It may have been physical, it may have been emotional, it could have been verbal, but I know of adult children who have witnessed. And the lessons or the recommendations for those adult children is to forgive the past experiences. It could be a child who've witnessed, then becomes a perpetrator. It could be a child who've witnessed, then becomes a victim because they've seen their parents, because they've seen their parents being violent towards each other. Therefore, they become perpetrators or victims. I say to those children, there is nothing fulfilling than learning to forgive one's past experiences and create your own present and future. Of course, we might stand here and say, learn to be secured with yourself. Learn to have self-confidence. We are living in the days where you can see grown somebody, a man or a woman, having a relationship with someone younger to be their own children. And you say, where is the self-confidence and self-secured in that? I have another point, lessons for our communities. Communities, societies, we need to revisit cultural customs that still exploit and dehumanize women, put women in compromising situations. Our churches, as well as religious groups, they need to strongly condemn the violation of women's rights, which is human rights. Some time ago, I had a conversation with a colleague of mine who comes from theology. And he came to me to ask if he can write a paper where he wants to say women who stay in violent relationships are naive women. And I said, a colleague, pastor, doctor, you cannot say women who stay in violent relationships are naive women. He said he wanted something that will shake them. And by shaking them, then they will exit this relationship. I turned the wheels on the impact that our churches have. That you need to look into what role do you play as a pastor. And he says, yes, you know, what we say as pastors, we look into the reasons for exiting, and none of those reasons, which has to do physical abuse, emotional abuse, is in that category. So we just cancel them and say all is going to work out. And when that happens, he has witnessed that a woman has ended up committing suicide or being killed. And I said, then a colleague, write something about your role failing other women. Had you given empowering that woman in order to exit that relationship, none of this would have happened. So you have conscience to correct or indicate what should be the role of our church by condemning violation of women's rights, which we seem to be saying it's human rights. Lessons for government. I am being told now that the minister is here. I wish he would be here to hear for some of his colleagues, because I am going to be talking about the lessons for our government. The Department of Education, which is the Department of Basic Education, as it is bringing the history lessons, my plea to our basic education department is also to design curriculum that address gender equality. Department of Higher Education and Training, Mananga is here. My plea to them is to ensure that there are visible opportunities for men studying gender studies, to remove this woman-centered perception that gender studies is for women. There's nothing for women anymore. Everything is for everyone. The Department of Justice, we are observers of case sentencing and so on. We know of the act that was committed. We know the sentencing. And as observers, we seem to be seeing that class and gender undermines sentencing. And that is a challenge. And we also know as sociologists that people respond to social order and fear of the law. Nowadays, there is no fear of the law. We live in societies where there is social disorder. The Department of Police, we seem to be aware that assault, sexual violence, murder cases are not in separate files when it comes to gender-based violence. They are in consolidated files where if it's murder, but it's not a gender-based violence file. And the plea to our subs is to have forensic science laboratories in all 9 provinces. We have 9 provinces in South Africa. For the likes of me, it still does not come to make sense to me why we have a few provinces that have forensic sciences laboratories where evidence toolkits, rape toolkits are being kept. It still does not make sense to me why it only appears in 3 provinces and not in all 9. Department of Social Development creates opportunities for skills development for unemployed women. Unemployed women who are recipients of social grants so that they become skilled and employable to reduce the structural inequalities. Department of Women. There are so many issues, social ills that are attacking women. And the Department of Women needs to be in the forefront of those issues. The Department of Health insists that injuries caused by domestic violence must be treated as such. Nurses and doctors should extend their scope of work and refer victims of domestic violence to appropriate offices for counseling and so on, and reporting it to the police should be an obligation. Department of Housing, in the year 2014, the minister of the time was Melindiwe Sisulu, who suggested that if a couple is divorced, the housing must automatically go to the wife, because in many cases it is the wife who are responsible for children. I understand that law has not been implemented yet, and that is my plea, which then would address the findings that scholars of domestic violence argue that financially independent women stay in abusive relationship because of shelter. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. I'm not going to be very long. No, I won't even do that. I won't be very long. I think my colleagues have touched on very important points, but there are some
areas where I feel that there have been omissions in terms of the factors that are dominating violence in this country. We all know that unemployment is one of them. Prejudice is one of them. We're also talking about other harmful discriminatory practices and beliefs. One of the most contentious and mostly reported so-called custom, they call it a custom, I don't, I call it a distorted version of a custom. And that is of ukutwala, the distorted version of ukutwala. I'm emphasizing distorted because I think people have a tendency of thinking that the practice itself, ukutwala, as opposed to what is happening, is the same thing, and it is not. We are seeing children being abducted and being forced to marry older men under the guise of ukutwala. That is not ukutwala. And I think we need to clear that. Drugs and alcohol are also responsible for the violence that's going on. What is happening to the shebeens in our townships? What is happening to children going into these places? Why are people not checking for identity documents? Why aren't communities making a noise about closing these illegal taverns? These are the areas where some of this violence is happening. When I was in Alexandria in 2015, there was a tavern just opposite the church, my church, an illegal one. And you know, police were passing up and down quite happily. Children were being raped, women were being raped in the back room, and nobody was doing anything about it up until the priest in that church started making a noise about it. And eventually it was closed down. We had to even get the liquor board to be involved. So various people need to be involved in actually preventing and eradicating this problem. It's not just the police's problem. We all have a role to play. Then we also have the attitudes of society towards women, the patriarchal attitudes. Having worked in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, I have a chilling story to tell you, where we did an in-camera hearing about the gender-based violence that was happening outside South Africa, in exile, in the camps. And we had a very high-ranking official who had come in to give evidence. And he was asked this question, I'm not going to mention names, about the rape incidents that were happening in the country, which coincidentally are not even included in the final report of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which is sanitized as far as I'm concerned. And his response, you know, he was very jovial, didn't care that very much, and his attitude was, yes, it did happen in the camps. It was about supply on demand. I felt sick to the stomach because I had to eat lunch with this gentleman. And we are talking about post-apartheid now, the attitudes that we had in 1996 when we did this in-camera hearing. He's now deceased, he's no longer alive. But I mean, this is a practice that's still happening. It's happening at schools, it's happening at work. We keep quiet about sexual harassment. If you don't sleep with me, you are not going to get a promotion. I know of situations where people have had promotions because they have had to undress for the boss. We are not talking about it. It's all being swept under the carpet. Why aren't people being shamed for this? Why are we keeping quiet about it? There's another issue as well. Inferiority complexes of men, especially towards their successful wives and women. How many times have you been boxed because you are so-and-so at work? Or, yes, but you have a postgraduate degree. I am working day and night. Why aren't you working? Whilst you are busy raising your children. And then he feels that he can slap you, he can beat you, he can do anything to you. And he calls you useless. I am talking from experience, ladies and gentlemen. This is not something I'm sucking out of my thumb. The other thing that we are having a situation where abused men who have been abused children, the cycle, it's becoming a vicious cycle. And it has never been addressed. This I have picked up as a lay counselor, where you actually dig deep and you find that actually one of the reasons why this is actually a recurring problem is because he was abused at home. My ex-husband was like that. His mother used to be assaulted almost on a monthly, daily basis. He looked very gentle. When we got married, I saw the dark side. And then when I found out, when I said, no, I'm leaving this man, and his mother begged me, she said to me, yes, but I stayed. Why can't you? And I said, I'm sorry, Mrs. Altman. My father never abused my mother. So it is these factors which influence this vicious cycle, and I think we need to be mindful of that. The other thing that I would like to point you in the direction that I'd like to point you in, is that there is a link between gender-based violence, femicide, and trafficking in persons. People are actually pulled into trafficking because they've been in gender-based violence. So it is a contributory factor. It's a pull. I don't know whether you call it a push or a pull factor. I don't know which one is which. But it does influence people being trapped in that situation. Secondly, we have conflict situations where gender-based violence does happen. I think the case we had was in 2014, the Boko Haram case of those school children who were actually kidnapped, and their intention was to sell them as brides, forced brides, or as slaves. And it's not just happening in Africa, it's happening in other African countries, but because of lack of time, I will not elaborate on that. Trafficking in persons, victims or survivors, that's the word I prefer, are also gender-based violence victims. They are used for sexual exploitation. State versus Jezle, I think everybody knows about it, where a man, a 35-year-old man, allegedly married a 14-year-old girl and repeatedly raped her in Cape Town and also in that Engel. And at some stage, his brother even held her to the ground so that he could rape her. He got 22 years imprisonment. So we do have such situations here in our own country. And they're also used for forced labor, so it can happen simultaneously, and sometimes might end up in femicide. Femicide, maybe because the survivor did not do what the perpetrator wants. Femicide, because in the cycle of human trafficking, we are having a situation where people are being sold for the removal of organs. So you might get a situation where people are actually ordering female parts for whatever reason. So there is a link between them. And I would also like to say, there is no need for any more laws. We have wonderful laws. The problem is implementation. That is the buzzword, implementation. And people are not fulfilling their roles. The police for example, are not assisting the victims in the realization of their rights in terms of the equal protection of the law and protection of all the various rights, the right to life, the right to human dignity, the right to, your security of your body, and so forth. When you go to the police station, sometimes they do not want to take these cases. Gender-based violence cases, especially domestic violence cases, are considered as domestic disputes. In Stutterheim, where I come from, a small town, you call them out to come and intervene. Hi, sissy. Indaba ze-family as. It's a family matter in English. So those are the attitudes that we actually need to get rid of. But there's a flip side. We also withdraw cases, we survivors. There are two reasons. One, because we are reliant on the perpetrator for economic survival. So we feel that should he go to prison, we are going to be deprived of an income. And that needs to be addressed seriously. The other part is you find the survivor on the day of the trial, and I've seen this when I used to be a prosecutor. I see sangifuna ukuqhubeka necase, and they want to write a withdrawal statement. For whatever reason, it could be for fear of reprisal. It could be because they don't want to testify anymore. There are various reasons. But then, the National Prosecuting Authority has the discretion to proceed irrespective with the case. They are dominus litis, as they say. So they have control of the criminal prosecution. And they should at least determine as to whether they would want to proceed or not. There was a case here in the media a few months ago of two prominent people who beat each other. I think it was I think we all know about it. I'm not mentioning names. I don't know what happened, but those are the kind of cases we're getting. So why do you then expect people to report if it is so easy to withdraw such cases? Another problem is the problem of witness protection. People are not told about witness protection. People are not told about other mechanisms of reporting. So as a result, this impacts on the reporting, and you get under-reporting. And this is where the problem lies, is that information needs to be shared as to what other alternatives. If I do not want to be a witness, what other way can I forward such information? I can be an informant, for example. These things are not shared to members of the public. What are we saying now? These are just a few of the challenges I'm just mentioning. There's also police collusion. One very disturbing incident in the Trafficking in Persons report of 2016 was that you are getting a situation where people are going to report crimes. For example, this so happened to be a trafficking in persons case. And the police basically took the survivors back to the perpetrator. This is what's happening in reality. So there are a whole lot of factors which are actually contributing towards the situation getting worse. There's also the concern that we as civil society are not doing enough as well. So these are just a few things that I would like to recommend. The first thing for me is that we need to be proactive and not reactive. We need to address the causes of this type of violence. And the causes, the underlying causes need to be addressed. Unless poverty is not addressed, unless unemployment is not addressed, I promise you the situation is going to get out of control. We need to consider gender-based violence, femicide, trafficking in persons as part of the school and tertiary institution curricula. It needs to be part of it. If it were up to me, I would actually ensure that every student actually does do that kind of course. Because the problem is, the minute you do it for certain people, then how do you then bring about, how do you sensitize other people? Secondly, tertiary institutions need to play a lobbying role and make inputs for efficient implementation of the existing legislation, policies, and also point out the gaps where there are. You know, when I was a student in the 80s, universities were very vocal. After, 1994, suddenly, there's a lot of silence, there's gaps. We are not seeing universities in the structures that they should be in. For example, structures like your provincial task team, as an example, for preventing trafficking, child pornography, and so forth, we don't see them. When there are disturbing events happening, we don't hear from them. Thirdly, without awareness raising, there will be no reporting. There has to be a concerted effort to do this throughout the year. Let us not do it in August. Every August now, it's Women's Month now, we are going to talk about gender-based violence and femicide. We should be talking about this throughout the whole year. It should be a 12-month program for each and every organization, each and every member of society, each and every tertiary institution. That is what should be happening. And we are not doing enough of that. And there are not enough of us to do it within a short period of time. Collaboration, cooperation, and partnerships need to happen. For instance, universities could partner with existing NGOs and CBOs on these issues so that we're not duplicating. We are all working for the same cause. We are not competing against each other. Incubate those NGOs that are emerging. Mentor them. Give them guidance so that you at least beef them up. And the other question is the individual role. You need to have an individual role. We are all members of society or of communities. What are we as individuals doing in our respective communities with respect to what gender-based violence, femicide, and so forth? How are we utilizing our relevant skills and expertise? We could also consider involvement in structures like your community policing forums. The fora in the local government structures. I mean, you've got your safety and security structures. We need to have dialogues about these issues because there are disturbing reports that are happening, especially in universities these days, of femicide and gender-based violence. It's actually quite shocking. The last time I actually saw the shaming of individuals as perpetrators was when I was a student at UCT in 1989, where there were incidents of rape. And the women got so tired that we were not united as the South African National Students Congress on the issue of rape. And as a result, the university was divided into two, the students, between males and females. And as a result, an anonymous pamphlet was circulating the whole campus with names of students who were alleged perpetrators. I don't think we need to go that far. I think we need to start talking about these issues and sensitizing each other. The other, and lastly, and but not least, yes, we research. How are we utilizing our research? Yes, people are complaining that people are being released on bail for gender-based violence. Yes, we are crying out foul that the sentences are lenient. My question is, what role have you played as an expert in the sentencing, in the bail applications, in the trials? because without that evidence, the case becomes weaker. And I don't think that we need to wait for the National Prosecuting Authority to come to us. Why not go and approach the National Prosecuting Authority or SAPS and say, I am willing to assist with respect to this case by providing whatever information that I can in order to ensure that justice is done. Let us not keep this information to ourselves. There are many experts out there, and you find that we are relying on the same individuals to come and adduce expert evidence, whereas there are a lot of people within our realms who have that information. Secondly, in terms of assisting the survivors, how about we get involved in the counseling of such persons? You know, being volunteers, for instance, and also furnishing legal assistance. There are legal clinics in all the universities. How can we then utilize these clinics to actually address the problem? Those are the things that I would like you to think about from a practical point of view. And we need to seriously consider the time for us has come to be actively involved in these issues. Let us not meet once a year just to discuss these issues. Thank you.